Hello, and welcome back to My Therapist's a Witch. My name is Elizabeth, and I am a somatic psychotherapist in training. Today, I thought we could dive a little bit into the somatic psychotherapy world and share a little bit about the lessons that I've learned as I've completed my graduate program. This inquiry was inspired a bit by a couple of folks who reached out to me with very tender and sincere questions around what it's like being in a graduate program and kind of what to expect. And also, is this the right fit for me? And it inspired kind of this moving back in time moment where I really looked at the core parts of my experience and the things that have really landed and show up to this day when I'm in the room with clients. The tree of psychotherapy is huge. And the fun part about it is that there are branches and, little areas for everyone. And if what I share doesn't quite resonate with you, I guarantee you there is a place on the tree that probably will. And that's what I think is so great about our field, is that because we're in the work of the psyche, the soul, the mind, everyone is unique. And so there is a place for your specific type of abilities and your specific interests. So if I don't touch on them, that's just because I'm speaking from the branch that I happen to find my home on. So with that said, the process of becoming a therapist and going to grad school and all of that, it's a journey. It's a journey for everyone, and no one can tell you how your journey is going to go because everyone has a unique experience. For me, this journey really brought me into a deeper connection with myself and brought me to what I feel is my purpose. And that purpose then motivates me to continue on this journey. And at least in my experience, I feel like this journey of becoming never really ends. That it's a continual process and practice of learning, of growing, and learning how to be flexible and surrender to the forces that emerge in the therapeutic space. One of the first lessons that I learned that really stuck with me was that psychotherapy is really soul work. And there's something really sacred about holding space for folks as they dive into the unknowns of who they are, of who they might be. And I've learned to hold this work with a lot of reverence. And I truly feel honored to be able to hold the stories of people who have entrusted me with parts of themselves. And I think when we, even from the beginning, kind of hold that frame around this work, it already starts to cultivate compassion. It already starts to cultivate a position that perhaps being a therapist is truly a position of service. I think no one can tell you how to be a therapist. You can read about other people's experiences. You can watch videos of people doing psychotherapy with a client and things like that. But you don't really learn how to do it until you get in the room with someone. Now, it's really important to study, to train, to have a foundational theory that sort of is a pillar of your work, because it then gives you a lot of insight on how to communicate what is arising in the space. But very rarely have I directly used things that were exactly from a book that I read. It's more of the education part of your experience is mostly learning the language to these feelings that you will have, and being able to communicate those to another person, because often we're working kind of in the liminal spaces of the unconscious and consciousness. We're working within that world of co-regulation where for some reason that day things just click and more of the story can emerge. And it's really helpful for some people for you to be able to tell them what's happening in a very grounded, mundane world, kind of factual way, because that brings them a sense of comfort and safety. And it also helps you as you're sort of navigating the sea of sensations that will inevitably arise when you're sitting with someone as a part of the process. I think you learn how to be a therapist by being a therapist. It's your first clients that will teach you the most, and they will show you the kind of therapist that you are if you're willing to be open and learn from them. Now, a common thing that I think we all face when we're in that liminal space of we're still in our graduate program and maybe we haven't quite sat with clients yet, and the fear of, oh God, am I going to really mess somebody up? What happens if I make a mistake and all of this? And I think you need to find your way of grounding in the experience. So for me, that grounding really came from a frame that I took on to myself, where for me, the efficacy of a psychotherapist is directly connected to their willingness to face their shadow, process their trauma, and do their work. So, because I was in this process of doing my work while I was in graduate school, I was doing deep trauma work with my therapist. On one hand, it gave me a purpose to continue to do my own work as I was facing some of the hardest things that I had ever done in my life, because there was this wisdom inside of me that knew I have to clean out this closet because I might need this space for someone else. I might need to hold something for a time. And if my closet is full, I'm not going to be able to do that. And I truly believe that we must clean out our closets. We must do our own work so that our hands are big enough to hold someone else. And for people who have resistance to doing their own work or who just aren't ready yet, I've noticed that their clinical work struggles a bit because there are places within themselves that they're not willing to go, and so they're not willing to follow their clients into those spaces. This kind of leads into, I think, a part of the process that a lot of people don't talk about, and that is how much of yourself will come through in supervision. A lot of the training is sort of, how are you showing up in the room? What are you struggling with as the therapist? And, regardless if you go to therapy or not, you're kind of going to have some therapeutic moments in your supervision, because we cannot help but be changed and transformed ourselves by being a part of this process, even if we're in a position of power, even if we're a person that doesn't really lean too close to something and we try to create distance. Even then, you will still feel that force, that changing drive. And I think you get the most out of your training when you're willing to be really honest with yourself. A lesson that I've learned from many clients, and I continue to learn through many clients, is that of parallel process. So what do I mean by parallel process? Parallel process, as I've come to experience it, is that say I'm in a session with someone and I'm noticing that there's some resistance, or we're not quite getting to a place. It kind of feels a little clunky and maybe there's some misses. It's just not quite in the flow. And almost always, when I take time to really go inside of myself and ask the question, what am I resistant to with this person? What am I struggling to lean towards? When I go through that parallel process of doing my own work on the side, a very interesting thing happens where when I'm with the person the next week or a couple sessions after that, that opening happens. And it can sometimes feel very magical, to be honest, where the thing that you're doing completely outside of the therapeutic space that the person has no idea you're doing, something about that work opens up a new capacity in the work that you're doing with this person. So often when I notice resistance, I don't immediately move to, oh, maybe there's something with this person or blah, blah, blah. I first look at myself. And I very objectively and critically look at myself and go, am I resistant? Is there a part of me that's resistant? Is there a story that I'm holding on to that is being awakened by being with this person at this time that I need to pay attention to and that I need to spend some time with before I can really be available for this other person? And, as new budding clinicians, you'll feel a lot of pressure. You'll feel a lot of pressure from your clients. You'll feel a lot of pressure from your fellow therapists in training. Like there's just a lot of pressure going around. And we can't control other people, and often we can't control the situations, but we can change ourselves. Even if that's just a subtle change of the way we think of something, or a subtle change in how we're showing up in the session. And those little subtle changes can have huge cascading effects. So when you feel stuck and you feel like, oh, there's absolutely nothing to do, look inside yourself first and see if there's something to do inside. Along with this parallel process that I'm talking about, and you can probably tell as I'm going through these a little bit, is that the journey is still going. The journey never really ends. And the more that I have turned my inner eye to myself, how I'm showing up, how can I change in order to better support someone else, that I've learned where it gets clunky are the times when I have asked people to go farther along the journey than I have gone on myself. And when I hold this awareness of, if I'm going to ask this person to go this far, or to be this vulnerable, or to dive this deeply into their unconscious, then I better have done it first, because I'm the one guiding this experience. I'm the one holding the torch. And I think there is a wisdom in our clients on an unconscious level that they can tell when we're asking them to do something beyond our own scope, whether that's scope of practice or our scope of awareness. So the journey keeps going, and this is why I kind of get excited now when I feel resistance, because now there's like a new part of the journey for me to explore. And what a gift that this client has given me the opportunity to move even deeper into myself, to venture farther than I thought possible along my own journey. You can kind of tell I'm pretty wooey in the way that I conceptualize this stuff. That's partly just who I am, and that's how I think about it. But the next thing that I'm going to talk about is a little bit more concrete. And this is a lesson that I am very grateful that I learned very quickly. And that is that therapy is not about fixing people. And I'll say it again. Therapy is not about fixing people. It's not your job as a therapist to change someone for the better. It's not your job to get this person to change their life and to, become whatever you think they should become. Therapy is really about being company along someone's journey. And it's not a passive thing. It's not this, you just sit back and you kind of sit in a chair and you listen to them talk and you're like, okay, your time's up and there you go. There are often these very intricate and subtle processes that are happening underneath the words that we share with each other. And this is what I mean about it. So I'm a trauma-informed somatic psychotherapist, and everything that I think about in terms of holding space with a person, the therapeutic alliance and bond, is really framed around how I've been taught to view trauma, how that shows up in the body, how to track a nervous system and things like that. So for me, and also being a somatic therapist, we're paying attention to the body. There is a different type of listening that is happening when you sit with a somatic psychotherapist, because yes, we are paying attention to what you're saying, but we're also paying attention to what your body is saying and what your nervous system is doing. So it's not a passive thing at all. In fact, it's a lot of effort to hold your attention and kind of widen your awareness and listen with your whole body with that person. And this is where we get into the realm of co-regulation, attunement, mirroring, all of these really powerful forces that help someone move deeper into a relationship with themselves. So I think about it this way. I'm a nerd. I play D&D. So hopefully this analogy makes sense. When someone comes into therapy and that co-regulation starts to happen, it's almost like the therapist is giving the client temporary HP. And for those of you who don't play D&D, that's temporary health. So you're getting a boost in your health. You're getting a little bit more. From a somatic perspective, everyone has a window of tolerance. And within this window of tolerance, this is about as the space a person has to be able to process and be with their story, their material, what's happening. For people who have experienced trauma in their life, that window can be very narrow. So even just starting to talk about what happened, boom, they get sent out of their window of tolerance. There's mild dissociation happening, and they can't actually be with their experience. With a somatic psychotherapist who's aware of this, we can help support the person to widen their window of tolerance. And that can happen through co-regulation. That can happen through a lot of different ways. But that's, in a very simplified version, what can happen, where in that moment where you're sitting with that therapist, you go from a very narrow window of tolerance to a little bit wider. And now you can talk about it perhaps without getting flooded and overwhelmed and dissociating. You can move a little farther down your journey. And this is why therapy is different than sitting with your friend and talking about what happened to you. These are the subtle forces that are happening underneath the words. So for instance, when I'm really focusing on co-regulation, it's more of an art in my experience. And it takes some time to figure out how to kind of connect with someone on that level. Like, how can we feel safe together? Can you feel my presence? Right? And it's sort of this dance. But when you can dance with your client in that way, when we're both in that rhythm together, that window of tolerance can widen by quite a lot. And then new things emerge because it's safe enough for those things to emerge. So I'm not necessarily healing someone's trauma. I don't think I have that power. But I'm supporting someone as they heal themselves. I can offer, again, to use the D&D metaphor, a little bit more health, a couple temporary HP points. And maybe that's enough to finally get to you to a place that you haven't been to before, where now you can really be with your awareness, looking at the thing that happened, and allow for your body's own natural wisdom and nervous system of how to process it to naturally unfold. And I think when we take this approach, it starts to kind of guide us into this other lesson that I learned, which is training to be a therapist. It's a long haul. It's like 3,000 hours or so that you need to gain before you can even move on to licensure. And I've just begun this journey. It's fairly new for me. But I'm actually grateful that it's going to take that time, because training, and this is a lesson I got from my first supervisor, and I think I can remember the quote actually. He said that the 3,000 hours of training is about reducing the primacy of your ego's forces. So again, kind of what I was talking about before, it's letting go of that story that you're here to heal people. It's letting go of, I'm responsible for blah, blah, blah. I should get this person to change blah, blah, blah. And when we can just sit without our ego, without being attached to it, without being attached to our own story of, am I doing this right? Or am I a good therapist? Or what does my client think? When we can let all that go, it actually gives us more space to listen. And when we listen on that whole body experience, then all this other stuff gets to come online. The last thing that I want to talk about here is sort of more speaking to often the fear that I hear in people who are thinking about becoming a therapist. And I think we all have fear, because whether we're conscious to it or not, there's a part of us that's aware of how deep and tender this work is. And it takes stamina. And you're not going to know if you can do it until you get in there and try it. And that's why I think it's so important to ask yourself the question, are you called or are you driven? Is there a force that is pulling you towards this work? Is there a flow that's naturally happening? Is there a purpose? Or are you driven? Have you pulled, so many cards out of a hat and decided, oh, okay, I guess I'll be a therapist? Is the paycheck something that you really care about? Is your ego attached in some way to being a therapist? If you venture on this branch of the tree that I sit on, you will be called into the depths of Hades over and over and over again. You will venture down into the depths of someone's unconscious with them. You will face their terror with them. And that takes a lot of stamina. And the reason that I have that stamina is based on how my entire life has been up until this point. There are many things that I can't do. In fact, there are a lot of things that I can't do that I just don't have the stamina for. But my body and my nervous system and my mind and soul have the stamina to do this work. And I think that process of going down into Hades over and over again is that you will be transformed over and over again. Like I said before, this is a journey, and the journey never ends. There will always be new depths to venture. There will always be things that arise that need your attention. And the ease comes from the fact that you have done this over and over again. And so you know you will be okay. And I think when we accept that and we're willing to surrender to be changed, on an unconscious level, our clients or the people that we share sessions with, there's an unconscious part of them that can feel that can then trust what's happening. Perhaps it's a part deep inside going like, well, if she's done it, then I guess I can do it. And I think in particular, when it comes to trauma work, I think that's really true. Because for me, as I've been a client, I think there was a part of me that wasn't ready until I found the right therapist. And so, because I've had that experience of being on the receiving end, I don't take it personally when I'm not quite the right fit for someone. Because when I am the right fit for someone, it becomes evident very quickly that we will both be transformed by this process. I think as a therapist, I really view this position very similar to being a witch, in that I think therapists are creatures of liminal spaces, especially if you're into depth psychology, trauma work, things like that. Because there is a very deep and rich world that exists in people that is rarely ever witnessed outside of the therapeutic space. So in a way, being in the room together is kind of this non-ordinary state of reality. And there's something very magical about it. And I enjoy being awed and amazed at the wonders that exist inside of people. And I don't think I'll ever get tired of it. So if you feel called to this journey, as I'm ending at least this educational journey myself, I think I would tell you what I would tell my younger self. And that is to follow your joy. And joy isn't always what you think it is. Because at the very beginning, I was pretty resistant to being a trauma therapist. I didn't think this is where I was going to end up. But by following my joy, reading the things that I found interesting, connecting to the people that I found interesting, listening to that thing deep inside of me that went, ooh, wow, I found myself here. So if you can, listen to that part of yourself that's deep inside going, ooh, the curious part. Because that will lead you to your joy. And I think joy leads us to our purpose. Now, the irony does not leave me in the fact that I guess I find joy in being a trauma therapist. But I do, I really do, because there is something so joyful when a person realizes who they truly are, who realizes who they are without all the masks or the character armor or all of the things that they needed in order to survive and just get to this place where they're at now. And so when finally they get to let all of that go, even if it's just for a moment, even if it's just for a moment with you, there's this joy that just emerges out of people. And it's a pure, magical thing. So, with all that being said, I think if you're afraid to take up this work from where you're sitting now, because perhaps you've experienced trauma or you've gone through your own hardships or you've gone into your own journey and you've gone, wow, there's some shit in my closet. At least for me, I get curious of, wow, what gifts are inside of you that someone needs? Because perhaps it's just you. It's just exactly how you are, warts and all, trauma and all. That is just the right medicine that a person is waiting for. As always, I hope that something that I said was helpful or useful. And again, if anything I said didn't quite land, I encourage you to keep searching. Because like I said at the beginning, this tree is very big and there are many branches that are very different than mine. And so if you're feeling called to being a therapist, I can assure you that there is most likely a branch that is just the right fit for you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I look forward to the next time we get to spend with each other. Until next time, take care.